Who among you has ever struggled with excessive daytime sleepiness, which interfered with thinking, working, and even living? Today I will tell you about 7 causes of daytime sleepiness. Watch this video to the end, and I will give a simple enough advice on how to combat daytime sleepiness during the day if you just didn't get enough sleep. The first and most common cause is simply not getting enough sleep. In fact, a human is the only living creature that consciously limits its sleep. No other mammal consciously deprives itself of sleep. And we, in pursuit of some lofty, distant goals, think that let's sleep less, achieve more, and do something in life. But at what cost? I generally like officials, businessmen, or just patients who come to me. They say, "Doctor, let's do something so that I sleep little and work a lot." Okay, great, let's breathe half as much. And let's drink half as much water. How will this end? A man will die. So, sleep is a genetically necessary condition if any mammal is deprived of sleep or severely restricted. First, a person becomes incapacitated and then they can die. And I also like to tell my patients that if you don't get enough sleep chronically, it's like you're taking out a loan from a bank. You might buy more there, but you'll have to pay it back with interest. Same here, you might do something more, but then you'll have to pay it back with interest. And the interest is your health and generally your life. And how much of your health or even life are you willing to sacrifice just to deprive yourself of sleep for a while? How can you tell that you're not getting enough sleep? Each person has their own sleep duration. But we do have an average value of 8 hours, but the range is from 4 to 12. There are short sleepers, there are long sleepers, and everyone has their own sleep duration, and everyone has their own sleep deprivation duration. And some people can even stay awake all night and generally feel more or less okay. And for some, if a person hasn't slept for 2 hours, they're already unable to work the next day. And the main principle of good sleep is when you wake up in the morning and within 15 minutes you come to a working state or to study or just to a normal life, you don't experience pronounced sleepiness that would interfere with your life, but by the evening you get so tired that you fall asleep within 15 minutes. That's how much you need to sleep normally. But if you start to not get enough sleep, you wake up in the morning with the feeling that you can't lift your head from the pillow, and then you get drowsy, and you fall asleep with a book, computer, and so on. This is excessive daytime sleepiness, which may be associated with the fact that you simply didn't get enough sleep. Well, in this situation, simply if you just sleep more, this daytime sleepiness will go away. Yes, that's true, but the problem is we don't have healthy habits in terms of how well and qualitatively we live, and especially how we live according to a regimen. When it's bright, for example, yes, they get up regardless of work days or weekends, because even on weekends, cows still need to be milked, or rather, they produce milk. And we have the lifestyle of a city dweller who gets up early during the week, sleeps in on weekends, overall has a shift work schedule. We have 20% of the inhabitants of large cities with a shift work schedule. It's completely unclear what and how happens with the regime and so on. And very few people who would just wake up in the morning with the feeling that they had a fantastic sleep. To achieve this, you must follow a healthy lifestyle and regime. But at least, even if you didn't get enough sleep, you woke up maybe not very well, but within 15 minutes you could still come to your senses and continue to function. That is, there is such a morning person. Although, of course, there is, I don't know, maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20 who wakes up like, wow, a new day has begun, what a joy. The second most common reason, it is also essentially related to lack of sleep, or rather with the disruption of the regime. This is the so-called social jet lag or socially conditioned shift work disorder. Jet lag occurs when we change several time zones by flying long distances, such as from Moscow to Vladivostok, which has a 7-hour time difference. Flying eastward is more difficult. There is even such a statistic, it was tracked by trackers. The average Muscovite, for example, a resident of a big city, gets up 2 hours later on weekends than on working days. And 10% of Muscovites get up 4 hours later compared to working days. What happens? During the week, a person does not get enough sleep, especially owls like to sleep a little later, so to speak, but still have to get up early. A sleep deficit accumulates, and the owl sleeps beautifully, let's say, not getting up at 7 in the morning, but let's say at 11 in the morning. Well, that is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 4 hours difference, having slept beautifully on Saturday, then walks around on Saturday, again gets up at 11 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, also having slept beautifully. But what happened? We have mixed up our circadian rhythms. This person 4 hours later, it's irrelevant whether he flew from Krasnoyarsk or Novosibirsk to Moscow. And all the processes in the body have also slowed down. All right, it's even more convenient to insert it later. Well, that is to catch up on sleep. That is, you can catch up on sleep if you've accumulated a sleep deficit. However, if you're well rested, you can't force yourself to fall asleep at will. Evening arrives for someone who woke up at 11 or even 12 in the morning. He can't fall asleep because he's caught up on sleep. He struggles until the middle of the night, and then he might even take some kind of sleeping pill. In the morning, he can't open his eyes. It doesn't matter that he flew from Moscow to Krasnoyarsk again, where he has to go to bed and get up 4 hours earlier. Getting up in the morning is also problematic. Moreover, adaptation takes about an hour a day. That is, if a person flies east, if he shifts his time zones 4 hours later, it will take him approximately 3 to 4 days to get back into a more or less normal regime. The following weekend arrives and it all begins anew. One of the main questions I ask patients who come to me complaining that they have trouble falling asleep and waking up is what time they go to bed and get up on both work days and weekends. And if I see a difference of 2 hours or more, sometimes 3, 4, 5 hours, then I don't start with pills, but I simply say, dear friend, let's conduct an experiment. For 2 weeks, you will get up at the same time, regardless of whether it's a work day or weekend, and you'll start waking up 5 minutes before the alarm goes off, having had a good night's sleep. Sure, let's try it. Well, someone, of course, just comes behind the tablet, and someone says, okay, I'm not laughing, but I'll convince you. Most people start to sleep normally, wake up at that time we planned, even if it's 7 in the morning. Because the body adjusts all its circadian rhythms to this wake-up time, the full cycle ends, rapid eye movement, sleep, and a person wakes up feeling refreshed. And then the time of retreat adjusts to the time of ascent. And this regime very well adjusts all our biological rhythms. A person is well awake during the day and sleeps well at night. And if there is a constant shift, then what happens? A person half sleeps at night and is half awake during the day. Hormonal imbalances and disrupted circadian rhythms are to blame. The body is confused about when to sleep and wake up. These are the problems that can occur with social jet lag. If you also like to catch up on sleep over the weekend, wake up 2 hours later on weekends compared to work days, give this video a like. Third, snoring and obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. I want to say that snoring in general is like a red line going through many videos because it ruins a lot in a person's life. In fact, I would say there was even such an expression that snoring and apnea are the cornerstone of modern sleep medicine. And in general, back in the 50s of the last century, it was believed that a rich man's snore, well, yes, the rich, they do snore. It's a sign of a rich man's health. Then in America, they conducted such a long-term study and showed that people with snoring for some reason live less than people without snoring, comparable in other respects. And only later, when they started to figure it out, it turned out that people don't die from snoring, but snoring is a syndrome of obstructive sleep apnea, or the disease of breathing stops in sleep. When a person falls asleep, their muscle tone decreases. If there are factors that contribute to the narrowing of the airways, such happens. And they fall. This is common obesity, tonsils, and lower jaw structure issues. Well, in general, everything that narrows the airways. So, a person fell asleep, the muscle tone decreased, and such an episode of astonishment occurs, a fall of the respiratory tract. The brain sleeps, automatically sends breathing impulses. The person can't breathe because their respiratory tract is not functioning properly. And only when the blood oxygen saturation drops, a stress reaction occurs, a jump in arterial pressure. This information reaches the brain and stimulates the brain. The brain wakes up and enters a superficial stage, commanding the respiratory paths to open. The person loudly gasps, often not remembering the stops, but recalling the superficial, restless, and non-refreshing sleep, sometimes waking up feeling astonished. But as soon as the brain woke up, breathed, and fell asleep by the respiratory path, it was already asleep again. And there can be 300, 400, 500 stops of breathing during the night. Imagine someone knocking on your brain 500 times and saying, breathe, breathe, breathe. And so once a minute, no matter how much a person doesn't sleep, he can't get enough sleep. When we do polysomnography, we make a diagnosis, we count these stops, and the drop in blood oxygen saturation, we also look at how much the brain has woken up. So the brain can wake up the same 300, 400, 500 times a night. and we get a very superficial sleep. For example, the first stage should be 25%, but it becomes 50, 60%. That is practically ineffective sleep. Deep stages of sleep disappear, rapid eye movement sleep is disrupted, the physical person does not recover, informationally he does not recover, that is, he does not clear the operational memory. And this leads to superficial, restless, non-refreshing sleep, fatigue from the morning, and the heaviest daytime sleepiness, no matter how much a person slept. This is a serious issue. I've been involved in 2 trials where sleep apnea patients cause fatal car accidents after falling asleep while driving. Such an imperative sleep, a person doesn't even realize that he is falling asleep. There's often a situation where a man is sitting and his wife nudges him, telling him not to snore. Well, I'm snoring, but watch the TV. And it's enough for 3 seconds at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour to fall asleep. So in 3 seconds, the car will travel 100 meters. And what if there's a pedestrian crossing and people are walking? And what if it's a driver who is transporting a bus full of children? Yes, there's a sharp turn there. Here's a sad statistic for you. Half of these sleepers, according to expert assessment, are patients with sleep apnea who experience the most severe daytime sleepiness. So if you have snoring, snorting, pauses in breathing during sleep, nocturnal and morning hypertension, nocturnal headaches, reflux, frequent urination, gasping and ineffective sleep, daytime sleepiness, be sure to see a sleep specialist, get tested, get an accurate diagnosis, and get effective treatment. It's a sleepiness that can, be fatal. Well, of course, it's not the sleepiness that kills, it's the sleep apnea that kills, but it's one of the cardinal signs of sleep apnea. Fourth, quite common, and by the way, increasing in frequency cause, is depression. Depression doesn't directly cause sleepiness. Although there are such severe depressions, yes, when a person, he doesn't want anything. In this situation, it's more about fatigue, exhaustion, and reduced work capacity rather than true sleepiness. I always clarify, I ask questions. Did you sit down at the computer and fall asleep? No, doctor, I can't even fall asleep during the day, let alone while reading a book. I constantly want to sleep. I'm so worn out, I sit there, even close my eyes, but I can't fall asleep. So it's not real daytime sleepiness, it's more fatigue and exhaustion, but people often interpret it as sleepiness. They inform doctors who sometimes lack full comprehension. Exhaustion and sleepiness differ, but some may struggle to distinguish between them. Depression gives a sense of tenacity, but what other effects does it have? Early awakenings with the inability to fall asleep again are a characteristic sign of a depressive state. So it happens, he more or less normally falls asleep, sleeps say 2, 3, 4 hours, then such a sudden awakening as a jolt. Someone wakes up, occasionally feeling almost no joy, checks the time, and finds only 2 to 3 hours have elapsed. And he doesn't want to sleep anymore, he has a flow of thoughts. As a rule, the thought process is negative at night, where all cats seem black. In the morning, he realizes the absurdity of his nighttime thoughts, but at night, his thinking is negative. By morning, he's exhausted from thinking, feeling fatigued and drained, wanting to sleep again. But he must get up, go to work, and continue living. And of course, a person has no strength, no energy, attention is reduced. That is, once again, a person begins to experience such fatigue, breakdown, and to some extent drowsiness, as it seems to a person. Especially this situation has recently, unfortunately, become more difficult in connection with the fact that chronic stress situation and chronic stress often lead to the development of reactive depression. Well, this further causes such fatigue, breakdown, and drowsiness, especially the last 3 years, starting with the pandemic and in connection with all possible modern events. This is a constant stress situation which can ultimately lead to a depressive state, to such a state during the day and when a person is tired, broken, and to some extent sleepy. Depression often begins with a state of anxiety before progressing to depression itself. That is, a person begins to react more actively to the situation, he has trouble falling asleep, but after some time of ongoing stress, a person seems to start sleeping better, but then wakes up in the middle of the night. That is, this anxious component is joined by a depressive component. And all this is caused by stress. I recently wrote a book called Stress and Insomnia, How to Break Out of the Vicious Circle, 12 Steps to Healthy Sleep. And it is described there what a person can do to resist stress and essentially not lead to the development of insomnia. In the description to this video, you can find a link to the book. And if you have stress, if you have problems with falling asleep, with early awakenings, then this book can help you cope with stress and insomnia on your own, perhaps even before visiting a doctor. These reasons may not be entirely obvious. Stress, difficulty falling asleep, snoring, and pronounced sleepiness can all be present even if you don't experience all of them. And perhaps the next significant reason is hypothyroidism, a decrease in thyroid function. In addition to other symptoms of hypothyroidism, lethargy, fatigue, and sleepiness can also develop in this situation. But here, what I can say, in general, if a person comes with daytime sleepiness, then a whole such diagnostic search is conducted. And in particular, we take tests, and the standard test always includes a test for thyroid hormones. Because if they are elevated, it can cause insomnia, and if they are lowered, it can cause corresponding fatigue and daytime sleepiness. Just by the test, we can accurately diagnose, even reveal hidden hypothyroidism, which can also cause sleepiness. The sixth reason, which may not be obvious and can be seen in tests, is a deficiency of vitamins and trace elements. In particular, for example, a deficiency of vitamin D, vitamins of group B can cause fatigue, breakdown, and sleepiness. Iron, a microelement. Iron deficiency can often lead to insomnia as such, and further if the situation progresses to iron deficiency anemia. And one of the symptoms of anemia is the corresponding excessive sleepiness, fatigue, and lethargy. A person comes to us either with insomnia or with sleepiness. This also includes a set of certain vitamins and trace elements that are part of the standard examination to determine the causes of increased daytime sleepiness. If you also experience periodic daytime sleepiness, write down what causes it for you. Maybe you just didn't get enough sleep. Maybe you have a shift work schedule, or you oversleep on weekends, or maybe you have an iron deficiency, or some kind of trace elements. Write it down. We will discuss it with you in the comments. The thing is that we have such a circadian rhythm, that is, we want to sleep at night and activity manifests during the day, as humans have a daytime existence. But during lunchtime, we also have a physiological dip in activity, and for some people, this is somewhat more pronounced than for others. And a sufficiently large number of these people can even sleep during the day. That is, it's a real sleepiness after lunchtime, but sleep for 20-30 minutes and everything is fine, then you won't be cutting it until evening. That is, sometimes this can simply be a physiological manifestation, a feature of your nervous system, which requires an after-lunch nap. This is also a variant that could be normal. The next reason is the intake of medications. Who among us has not taken medications? You know, there might be some kind of stretched analogy, but once Christ was walking and saw that they even want to stone the harlot. But he said, let the one who is without sin cast the first stone. Well, there was no such person. So I say, let the one who has never taken any drugs throw a stone at me. I hope no one will throw a stone at me. Well, it's not, so to speak, good. It's actually even bad, but it's reality. And many of our drugs can cause excessive daytime sleepiness. I perhaps will not list all of this now. In the description to this video, I will provide a more or less detailed list of drugs. You can directly read, look, do you take anything from this list? If you experience drowsiness, especially after starting a new medication, read the instructions for use. If there, obviously, is such a side effect, then possibly it is precisely due to the intake of the drug. But do not cancel it yourself. Be sure to consult with your treating doctor. Maybe you need to reduce the dosage, maybe replace it with some other drug, or maybe even cancel it. If, say, the harm from this drowsiness, you, for example, are a driver. Yes, you are prescribed some drug for hypertension, which gives pronounced drowsiness. Well, here you need to think. It means replace the drug, which will give less drowsiness because this is potentially dangerous due to possible traffic accidents in connection with falling asleep at the wheel. Well, and as I promised at the beginning, I will tell you how to deal with daytime sleepiness if you are not getting enough sleep. It's evident that the reasons for your lack of sleep are not severe or health-related, but rather circumstantial. Well, there is the most banal way. It's just to sleep during the day, yes, but it's not always possible. Far from always. It should be said that our sleepiness comes in waves. It is intermittent, typically lasting 15-20 minutes at a time per hour. And just if a wave of sleepiness has rolled over you, try to give yourself some physical or mental activity at that moment. Walk the floors, call someone, reprimand an employee, or attend a management meeting. After 15 to 20 minutes, the sleepiness will pass. You can switch to a more calm activity. And you will hardly notice this excessive sleepiness. And if you sit and suffer every hour and a half, 20 minutes, oh, what a nightmare, you want to sleep, and there you are rubbing your nose, you will have the feeling that the whole day is lost because you have been fighting sleepiness all day. In general, respond to sleepiness with activity. It can then calmly overcome sleepiness. You'll make it to the evening and sleep well at night. Subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so you don't miss my new interesting videos about sleep and its disorders.